It started with an email, a standard hotel reservation confirmation. Dr. Eleanor Ward had booked her stay at the Halcyon Grand, an aging hotel nestled deep in the Appalachian woods, as part of a weekend conference. The email, however, included a peculiar note: "You have been upgraded to room 1408. Please confirm your acceptance." Eleanor didn't think twice and replied with a brief "confirmed." She had no idea a casual response would set a chilling chain of events into motion. The Halcyon Grand was a relic of another era. Its dark wood-paneled walls and flickering chandeliers gave it an eerie charm. Eleanor arrived late in the evening, the snowstorm outside swirling aggressively as if nature itself wanted her to turn back. The concierge handed her the key to room 1408 with a tight-lipped smile. "Any luggage, ma'am?" he asked. She shook her head, holding only her leather satchel. "Just this. Travel light," he murmured, almost as if speaking to himself. When the elevator stopped on the 14th floor, the doors opened to a hallway bathed in dim, yellowish light. A single flickering bulb hummed overhead. The hallway stretched unnaturally long, its carpet stained with dark, unidentifiable patches. At the far end, room 1408 stood waiting for her, the brass numbers tarnished with age. As Eleanor inserted the key into the lock, the faintest sound of whispering tickled her ears. She froze and looked around. The hallway was empty. The whispers stopped the moment the door swung open. Room 1408 was surprisingly well maintained, unlike the rest of the hotel. A warm fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the air smelled faintly of lavender. A queen-size bed, neatly made, sat in the center, flanked by two matching nightstands. A vintage rotary phone rested on one of them, its cord curled like a serpent. Eleanor placed her satchel on the chair and sat on the bed. She was exhausted but strangely alert, as if her body was instinctively aware of some unseen danger. She noticed a framed photograph on the dresser, a woman in a long dress standing in front of the hotel. Her face was blurred, but her eyes were oddly discernible, almost too clear. They seemed to follow Eleanor as she moved. Shrugging off the unease, she settled into bed and tried to sleep. That's when the phone rang. The rotary phone's shrill ring pierced the silence. Eleanor shot up, her heart racing. Who would call her at this hour? She hesitated before picking up. "Hello?" A distorted voice crackled on the other end. "Why did you come here?" "Excuse me?" Eleanor said, gripping the receiver tightly. "Leave now." The line went dead. She slammed the phone back onto its cradle, her pulse hammering. It had to be a prank. A guest, maybe? A drunk hotel employee? She grabbed the phone to call the front desk, but there was no dial tone. As she set the receiver down, she noticed something strange. The fire in the hearth had gone out, yet the room wasn't cold. The lavender scent had soured, replaced by the faint metallic tang of blood. The phone rang again. Eleanor's hand hovered over it, her instincts screaming at her to leave it alone. But she picked it up. "Who is this?" she demanded. A long silence. Then, the same distorted voice whispered, "Look under the bed." Her stomach tightened. "No! Who are you?" "Look!" The word roared through the receiver with such force that Eleanor dropped it. The phone clattered to the floor, its cord stretching taut like a noose. Her breath hitched as she stared at the bed. The shadows beneath it seemed darker, deeper, as if something was hiding in that abyss. Slowly, she lowered herself to the floor, her heart pounding like a drumbeat in her ears. She peered under the bed. At first, she saw nothing but darkness. Then, two pale hands shot out, grabbing her wrists. Eleanor screamed, yanking herself back. The hands retreated under the bed, vanishing into the shadows. She scrambled to her feet, her skin crawling with terror. The door. She needed to get to the door. She bolted for it, but when she turned the knob, it wouldn't budge. The lock wasn't jammed, it felt as though the door itself was fused to the frame. The phone rang again. She didn't want to answer it, but the sound was unbearable, slicing through her nerves. Against her better judgment, she picked it up. "You won't leave?" the voice said, almost gleeful now. "I'll break the window," she snapped, tears streaming down her face. "There is no window," the voice replied. Eleanor froze. Slowly, she turned to face the room. The window she'd seen earlier, overlooking the snowy woods, was gone. The wall was solid, featureless. The phone rang once more. She was afraid to pick it up, but something told her she didn't have a choice. This time, the voice sounded closer, as if it were inside the room. "Check the mirror." Eleanor turned to face the large mirror hanging above the dresser. Her reflection stood there, trembling, just as she was. But then it smiled, a wide, grotesque grin that stretched far beyond what was humanly possible. Her reflection raised its hand and pointed to the photograph on the dresser. Eleanor glanced at the photograph. The woman in the long dress was no longer blurred. Her face was clear now. It was Eleanor. The phone rang again, louder this time, almost vibrating off the nightstand. Eleanor didn't want to answer, but her body moved on its own. She lifted the receiver to her ear, tears streaming down her face. The voice whispered, "You're part of the room now." Before she could respond, the mirror shattered, and the room plunged into darkness. The next morning, the concierge at the Halcyon Grand noted that room 1408's key had been returned to the front desk. But the room was empty, as it had been for decades. No one had checked in. And the photograph on the dresser now showed two women. One of them was Eleanor,